Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General Flynn, you do make a powerful case for land power and collecting intel on the invasion force in advance as part of enhancing deterrence in the Indo-Pacific. I'm particularly interested in your testimony and the operations to place systems like Typhoon and HIMARS to deter PLA planning, deployment in the Philippines, shifting the Chinese calculus. I've read about the bellicose response from Beijing related to deployment of these systems in the theater. So we've got them rattled on that. That's a piece of deterrence. I am curious to know your thoughts on cooperation from our partners in the Philippines and Japan on prepositioning those assets at the EDCA sites in Japan, in the Philippines, and then given, I know we were just in Tokyo, the bipartisan group, their cooperation is spectacular, but with the potential relocation of the Marines from Okinawa to Guam, what is the cooperation we need on these systems in the south of Japan and in the Philippines?
Thanks, sir. Let me start in the Philippines. First of all, the benefit of having 9 EDCA sites is exponential. And I'll use another example. In Aguila Harbor in Subic Bay, we lease 3 million square feet of warehouses. And so we were trying to establish a joint theater logistics center there to be able to have commodities that we could use often. That's one location. And it's not an EDCA site, but it certainly benefits the United States, benefits the Philippine government, and benefits really the network of allies and partners to be able to have those capabilities there on the ground. On the ground, you can do co-production, you can do maintenance forward, you can fix forward, you can arm forward, and then you can distribute to the 9 EDCA sites in the Philippines. So you can see how valuable that port, and it's a deep water port, and the warehouses are. You know, you mentioned Tokyo. I'm going to go to Japan for a minute. Last year, I was down in outside of the metropolitan Hiroshima area. There's 2 Army ports down there and 5 different small installations that were built by the Japanese after the Second World War under the U.S. Leadership. We're only using about 40% of the storage on the ground in those facilities. Never mind Sagami Depot outside of Tokyo, never mind the stores that we have in Kadena and Okinawa, and of course the preposition equipment that we have in Korea. I guess the point I'm making is that we have physical access right now. What we don't have, and what I mentioned in my testimony, is that we're not putting the equipment on the ground fast enough. One example, there are 7 vessels that were loaded with prepositioning equipment afloat in the Pacific. We were taking those vessels and just having the equipment float out there. My point was, let's get it on the ground and keep it distributed and give the ships back to the Navy to recap them.
Well, so General, thanks for your service, and I represent the Bluegrass Army Depot, part of the Army Materiel Command. We need to do exactly what you suggest and pre-position over in the theater. Let me ask a quick question to Deputy Secretary Campbell. Strategic ambiguity. This has been a diplomatic debate. Should we abandon strategic ambiguity? Would deterrence be served by shifting to clarity as a policy of deterrence?
Congressman, my own view would be that the policy that we've adopted over the last 40 years, which I believe has substantial elements of clarity within it, but our declaratory position that you described, I believe, has served our strategic interests. And I believe there's still elements of that that can and should be sustained going forward. So I'm more focused on the steps that we're talking about here in terms of preparation, but I also believe we've been unmistakable strategically in our public declarations about what we stand for and what we...
Let me drill down on a detail of that. As you know, the PRC uses UN General Assembly Resolution 2758 to isolate Taiwan by misinterpreting the resolution to justify its fraudulent one China principle. Although the resolution makes no mention of Taiwan, does not authorize the PRC to represent Taiwan in the UN system, and certainly does not state that Taiwan is part of the PRC. What should be the U.S. position on China using 2758 to claim that Taiwan is part of China?
We should resist that at every possible effort, both in New York, in Geneva, and all the other UN activities that we're undertaking. Look, the truth is that the UN is a pretty important battleground for hearts and minds in the global south. We're frankly hurting our ability to operate in many of those capacities. I think one of the reasons to engage here is that it is essential that we get all these other countries in Latin America, Africa, and elsewhere that are buying into this approach to understand that it's contrary to their interests as well.
Thank you. I yield back.